Hey everybody, what's up? Jess here, coming at you with another Webster Wednesday video where we identify, define, and talk about terms, phrases, and lingo common to those in the queer community. Last week, Britt talked about hate crimes. If you have not gotten a chance to watch that video, then I encourage you to stop by the channel and give it a view. But for now, we are going to dive into a new topic. So today we will be talking about internalized homophobia. Now, I think to really discuss this term, we have to first talk about the term that many of us are more familiar with, and that is homophobia. But before I do that, I want to put a little disclaimer out there. The information, insight, and knowledge shared in this video may be things that step on some toes, as we like to say in the church I grew up in. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It may be uncomfortable, it may be painful to hear, but ultimately it's not a bad thing, because it's not until we can become aware and acknowledge that a problem exists that we can fix it. So we have a couple options today. You can put on your steel-toed boots to protect your toes from being stomped on, or you can slip into a pair of flip-flops, exposing those piggies to be trampled on if the shoe fits. The choice is yours. I just wanted to throw that out there. So we're going to go ahead and get into this topic. Homophobia is defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary as an irrational fear of, an aversion to, or discrimination against those who are homosexual or gay people. Now, I see homophobia a lot like racism, meaning that most of the time you're not going to find individuals who are loud and proud about the fact that they dislike or even hate a group of people based on their race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, whatever. Those individuals do exist, but a larger group of people walk around oblivious to the fact that the things that they say and do can come across as being homophobic or racist. And that's because of something we call microaggressions. It's just these messages and undertones that we pick up on because of influence from our culture, family, religion, society. There's a lot of different messages that we get, and we continue sending those messages in the way that we interact with others. So I just wanted to shed some light on some different examples of comments and behaviors that could be seen as homophobic. So some examples might be like taking a baby doll away from a little boy because little girls should play with dolls. Or making a comment like, God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. It's just not natural. Or maybe you see a young lady with a ring on her hand and she's announced that she's engaged, and you're like, oh, who's the lucky fella? Just kind of assuming that she's with someone of the opposite sex. Another one could be, maybe complimenting someone of the same gender but then feeling the need to follow it up with a statement like no homo. That might not be as popular nowadays as it used to be, but I worked with youth long ago when I first started in the field, and at the place I worked, a lot of the guys would do that. They would say, "Oh, I like your hair, no homo." They wanted to make sure it was, clear that they weren't coming on to another guy, but that they liked their hairstyle. So I don't hear that as much today, but that would be an example. Another one I think that we are facing currently is that, people are afraid of sharing a bathroom with a grown man. Because it makes them feel uncomfortable, makes them feel like maybe they're being targeted, and that is simply not the case when there's, someone's transgender. They're just using the restroom. They're not in there scoping out their next victim or anything like that. There's no reason to be afraid. I understand it's different and it may be uncomfortable, but asking yourself, like, why am I uncomfortable? Because they are not in there looking to victimize anyone. Those are just some examples. Some other examples might be like inappropriate jokes towards the queer community. Those are just some examples. Some other examples might be like inappropriate jokes towards the queer community, slurs. The list could really go on and on. I could talk for a very long time about different comments and behaviors that could be perceived by others as being homophobic. Now, I understand that we also are in a time where there's a lot of debate around whether or not people are just too sensitive. And, I find myself saying that as well. But I think that we kind of have to keep ourselves in check and make sure that we're not just being insensitive and hateful. And stuff like that just because, like that's our opinion. And I don't know, it gets complicated and I understand that. So please don't feel that I'm disregarding that. But I think it wouldn't hurt any of us just to be more sensitive and aware of the things that we are saying and doing. And so internalized homophobia comes about because of all these things that we're constantly hearing and seeing. And internalized homophobia is defined as a tendency to regularly invalidate, marginalize, and or oppress their own or other LGBTQ members' sexual orientation, sexual identity, self-worth, individual expression, and human rights. So many people who are in the community still question whether or not they deserve the same rights as straight people. And they question whether or not they are loved by God and whether or not they have a place in the church. And in society even. And so these are things that as a gay person you struggle with. You feel less than and you feel like a freak sometimes, and it just gets really difficult, and you live inside your mind and you're very ashamed of who you are and how you see things and can hate yourself for it. And this is very detrimental on a lot of levels, but it's something that you got to kind of work through. It takes time, and as a person who has built their career on counseling. I, of course, always support seeking professional help through a counselor that may be able to help you process through some of your trauma and some of these things that you've heard and believed yourself your whole life. So that's helpful. Finding support groups in your area can be helpful, and I understand that when we live in smaller communities, this can be very difficult. But there are people like you out there, and if there's not a group that meets, maybe you just, sharing your thoughts and feelings with your closest friends is a start. Um, Getting, plugged in online with different support groups may be an option. Doing research and learning more about yourself and, about what's kind of normal and not normal can be helpful. These are just some suggestions that I have. Also, things like, shutting down inappropriate jokes, just not being a part of that. Um, Making sure that we're not assuming, that we know everything, that this gal's gonna in fact marry a man. Like, don't just go around assuming. Maybe use more neutral terms like partner, significant other, instead of, husband and wife. Those are just small changes that we can make day to day that could have a lasting impact on someone's life. You don't realize how much words mean. I mean, we realize it because we're all affected by the things that other people say, but just changing the way that we speak can be huge. So I will go ahead and wrap things up for today.